clearly in the eulogy that you wrote. So for my eulogy, Jimmy was born in Chicago, but he grew up and lived nearly his entire life here in Frankfort. He was not yet 3 when our father was transferred from Chicago to Frankfort by the Central Screw Company in the late 1960s. After living for brief periods on Reed Drive and Tatato Trail, Mom, Dad, and the then 7 kids moved to the house on Powhatan, where Jimmy lived right up until he passed away last week. Frankfort was the ideal place for Jimmy to grow up. Everybody knew him, and he knew everybody. Our mom often said that he was one of 3 people who was known universally simply by one name. Pele, the soccer star, and that guy were the other 2. It wouldn't be right to tell Jimmy's story without recognizing that he sustained injuries at birth that presented him with challenges throughout his life. Doing so would do injustice to his strong character and enduring spirit, both of which helped him in the face of real adversity. And while he gained all of our admiration by how he overcame those challenges, the biggest part of his story, and what he will best be remembered for, is not the obstacles he faced, but rather the impact he made because of the many gifts and talents with which he was blessed. When Jimmy was young, he had an uncanny ability to predict the weather. He could draw amazing pictures in a matter of seconds. He had a photographic memory for names and addresses. He absorbed maps and atlases at such a pace that he was a human GPS long before Google Maps was a thing. And he knew more about geography than all the volumes in the Encyclopedia Britannica. I remember years ago there was a challenge that if you could name all 50 states in 5 minutes, you were to win $5. If you ever attempted it or saw somebody attempt it, inevitably they would get snagged after naming 47 or 48 states. They would usually get caught up with a small state in the mid-Atlantic or an obscure state out west. I remember asking Jimmy to do it. And he took out his trademark printer paper and his black magic marker, and he began diligently writing. And after about 2 minutes, not only had he named all 50 states, but he had alphabetized them and he had listed the state capitals out next to him. Later, he became fascinated with foreign languages and cultures. I remember our family baseball trip that we took to Washington, D.C. He, Mom, Olivia, and I got in the cab together, and he started talking to the driver about his name tag that was on the dashboard. Jimmy could tell simply by the driver's name that he was from Bangladesh, as opposed to India or Pakistan or another nearby country. But more amazingly, he started talking to him about Rangpur, which I pull out Google and learn is a province in Bangladesh, which is where the driver happened to be from. He was an amazing guy. He was I know that and many of you have said by far, he was the smartest of all the Guarineris. Anne calls him our Renaissance man. Jimmy loved sports, and because he never knew an enemy, he was able to cheer for all teams with equally genuine excitement, including bitter rivals like the Cubs and the White Sox or Louisville and Kentucky. Sports were one of his outlets. Our mom always said how he used sports analogies to process and deal with some of life's more complicated situations. And I suspect when he saw me stepping up here to replace Richard this afternoon, he began asking Mom and Dad if he's on the 10-day or the 21-day disabled list. Jimmy also had a great sense of humor, and he was particularly amused by the absurdity of life, which is why I think he was such a big fan of the Far Side comic strip and of the Frankfort Capital Expo. Whenever he came across a circumstance that didn't make ordinary sense or what wasn't as it should be, he would often say, "Oh man," and he would wave his hands, because he was incapable of saying a negative or unkind word about someone or something. Jimmy also had a great sense of personal responsibility and of what was right. He was thoughtful and he was considerate. Whether it was complimenting the meal we were enjoying or the occasion we had just celebrated, he almost always said with his patented thumbs up, "Real good." Jimmy's life epitomizes the old adage that you get out of something what you put into it. He never knew a stranger because he made a point of asking questions of everyone he met. He wanted to know who they were, where they came from, and what they did. And after he met them, he never forgot who they were or the details of their lives, no matter how much time had passed between that first encounter. Jimmy wasn't burdened or blessed with the opportunities or the obstacles that come with the traditional rite of passage most of us face when we move out of our childhood home and begin life on our own. But what he did have, and the reason we feel his loss so strongly here today, is a deep, personal, one-on-one connection with each one of us. Even though there are 8 siblings, several in-laws, many, many nieces and nephews, Jimmy formed a very personal bond with each and every one of us. He was front and center at every celebration and gathering. He was both the family photographer and the family ambassador. He was the first to call on a birthday or a holiday, and he was dutifully by Mom's side through every up and down in the 25 and a half years since our dad died. Last night, Shannon and I took Olivia, Cam, and Alana to see To Kill a Mockingbird at the Grand Theater downtown. It's one of my favorite books, and I'm so glad that they went to see it with me. There's a scene at the kitchen table where Atticus is telling Jim about when he got his first gun, and his father admonished him that when he got bored of shooting at tin cans, and the temptation inevitably came for him to shoot at birds, his father told him he could kill all the blue jays he wanted, provided he could hit them, but that it was a sin to kill a mockingbird. Scout then asked Atticus why it was a sin to kill a mockingbird, and Atticus explained that mockingbirds don't do one thing but make music for us to enjoy. They don't eat up people's gardens, don't nest in corn cribs. They don't do one thing but sing their hearts out for us. I sent a text to some of my friends who live nearby and who were aware of Jimmy's dire health situation in the final week to let them know that he had peacefully passed away. The first 3 responses I got on that text line showed just how much Jimmy personified Atticus's description of a mockingbird. The first text said, "He brightened my every day every time I ran into him." The next one said, "Simply a good person every day of his life." And the third one simply said, "He was a rock star." The many sentiments that have followed in the calls and the texts since those initial text messages have all been the same. Quantitatively, compared with life expectancies, the 57 years Jimmy lived was too short. But qualitatively, when measured in impact, when measured by the capacity to love and to be loved, our brother lived 5 lifetimes. He will continue to live on in our hearts and our minds. When we left the movie theater last night, there was a steady flurry of snow coming down in the twilight, and I knew, you know what, Jimmy's here. Everything's going to be all right. It's like I told him in that last week many times, "Jimmy, you go take care of things up there, and we got to take care of down here. But we love you, brother. We love you. We're never going to forget you, Jimmy." We'll all be reunited one day.